My Stalker by Charlotted House. Many years ago, I squired a stalker. He stalked me to my job, school, parents' house, home, rifled through my trash, the whole nine. I was constantly terrified, even though I had a restraining order. One day I came home from the store, walked in, left the door open, and walked straight to the kitchen. Turned around, and this motherfucker was standing in my kitchen. I'm right next to the sliding glass door, and on the other side of it was our roommates and mine, Great Dane, and he was going ballistic. This guy started moving towards me, and let me tell you, your life doesn't flash before your eyes when you think you're about to die. Time slows down, and it seems like an eternity. The only thing I could think of was the dog, and that the dog was the only protection I had. The knife block was too far away, and he could turn the knife on me easily. He was twice my size. So I reached over and undid the lock on the glass sliding door, and let me tell you, that dog came in like a wrecking ball and tore his ass up. I was just frozen. I couldn't move. My neighbor, who was the living personification of Petunia Dursley, called the cops because she heard the screaming. Cops show up, take the guy to the hospital, then to jail for violating the restraining order. They impounded his car after searching it, and what they found was horrifying. Souvenirs. Condoms taken from my trash. Stained period underwear I'd thrown out. Starbucks cups with my lipstick marks on them, and so on. But that's not the worst. There were photographs of me, from everywhere. Photos of my roommates, mom, brother, flings I'd gone on. What made my blood run cold was the shovel, duct tape, cat litter, unopened box of condoms, and rope. All the accoutrements one would need to, say, kidnap, rape, and murder a woman. The kicker? When it all went to court, he countersued me and my roommate for the cost of his medical bills and to have our dog put down because he was, quote, a vicious animal and a danger to society, unquote. The judge said, "You've lost your goddamn mind if you ever had one to start with. If that were my daughter, I'd put you down." Black Leather Jacket Guys, submitted by Frequent Flyer Miles. This happened to me when I was a senior in college. I was attending school in an upstate New York college and living in a house with 3 other guys. It was a duplex, and 4 other buddies lived next door, and we shared a basement. Typical shitty student housing in a college town. If you've ever lived off campus, you know most of the places aren't super nice. The landlords barely do anything to keep them up, and all they give a shit about is the rent. So our place had 1 bedroom downstairs off of a living room that was connected to a kitchen where our front door was. The other 3 bedrooms were upstairs, and there was also a bathroom there. A door to the shitty basement was off of the living room too, and it would have been cool to have a basement we could have thrown parties in like some of my other friends' places, but this one was just dark and damp and full of old chairs and shit. One night, we didn't feel like going out, so we decided to just have some friends and girlfriends over and smoke a little and drink a little. Back then, we drank this cheap-ass beer called Milwaukee's Best that we called the Beast. I don't even know if they still make it, but we only bought good beer once in a while. The way we drank, it was way too expensive to buy Molson's or Heineken or Labatt's or whatever. So anyway, everyone came over around 7:30 in the night, and we played a bunch of drinking games and were having a blast, laughing and some of us getting lit and others just nursing their beers. It was a good thing some guys were doing the latter. At one point, my housemate Jimmy ran out of smokes, and he was going to run to this gas station convenience store up the street. and I told him I was almost out too. I gave him some cash and off he went. This has sort of something to do with the story, but my girlfriend at the time, I'll call her Heather, hated that I smoked, and she told me that if I smoked, I wasn't getting laid that night. And keep that in the back of your mind, because this actually distracted me later. I laughed and told her, yeah, right, and she swatted me. At any rate, we're all kicking it, and I noticed that Jimmy had been gone for a long time. I was the first to mention it to everyone, but another guy, Rico, said he probably stopped at a bar on the way back that was near the gas station. Turns out he did, and it wasn't a good idea. A couple minutes later, the door to our kitchen burst open, and in comes Jimmy with a welt on his face that we could tell right away was going to swell up and go black and blue. He slammed the door and was on the verge of tears. He was so pissed off and, frankly, scared. Heather's friend, I'll call her Carrie, ran over to him with two of our other buddies and sat him down in a chair. He was shaking, so they got him a beer, and he lit up a butt and told us what happened. After the gas station, he popped into this bar that we went to all the time. Most of us were 21 at the time, and we hung out there because the owner let our underage friends in with no questions asked. He was a great guy. Jimmy went in, had a beer, and was talking to one of the female bartenders, and some townies shooting darts started staring at him. One yelled at him to stop talking to her, and she told him to mind their own business. Jimmy ignored this shit, and he got up to leave, and one of the guys came over and shoved him, telling him to get the fuck out. The bartender threatens to have all of them tossed, but the bouncer, a fucking giant of a human that we all loved and called Bilbo for some reason, came over and told them to knock it off or they were all out on their ass. Jimmy said at this point he didn't really look at any of them, but he did notice that all three of them were wearing heavy leather biker jackets with some kind of patch on the back. He left, and one of the guys who shoved him also came outside and then sucker punched him from behind on his temple and eye. Jimmy went down for a minute and saw the other guys coming out, and he just got up and took off for home, with all of them yelling shit at him. So now he's sitting there, his face is all swelled up, and the party has kind of taken a step back because of this. Three of my buddies immediately got up and ran back to the bar to start some shit, but the townies weren't there. They came back, and we all decided to just get back to the party, with Jimmy holding a bag of ice on his face, no longer mad and trying to laugh everything off. For another few hours, it was just the same fun night, and then some people decided to leave, and a bunch were going to stay and watch some movies. I made an exit with Heather to have a beer in private, and you know what. Lol. It was a while later, and we were just naked in my bed and sleeping off our buzz and the high from sex, when I heard some yelling from downstairs. Suddenly, there was a knock on my door and it burst open. My friend Chris was standing in the hallway light saying, "Dude, we've got trouble." I jumped up totally naked and followed him downstairs. The lights were off and we could see out into our driveway, and there were 6 or 7 guys in leather jackets standing there and throwing rocks at our house. We had a gravel driveway. At this point, there were 4 guys and me and 2 girlfriends in the house, and I went to the door and told them that they needed to leave. Not my friend and girlfriends, the guys. And I was really polite. I remember that to this day. Super polite. One guy whipped a rock at me and missed, and I went back inside, and this girl Jenny was already calling the cops. Another rock hit the side of the house, and I went back outside and right over to the closest guy and punched him in the face. I'm 6'2", and back then I was a psycho about weightlifting and working out. I really wish I still had my 6-pack abs, but time is worn on me, sorry. I'm just not in the same shape. So this guy goes down, and I'm in full rage mode, and still naked. These guys take a step back and start walking away as they help the other guy up, and I'm talking all kinds of shit to them. They left as I started throwing rocks at them, calling them pussies and telling them to beat it. A few minutes later, the cops show up. One tells me to get inside and get some clothes on, and then they came into the house. I got dressed, and we all told them what had happened to Jimmy, and that we thought it was the same guys who had just come over. They must have followed him to our place and then got some more friends and came back. By this time, most everyone was sober, and the cops were cool enough to overlook the weed someone had left out and told us to come to the station tomorrow to fill out a report. They also said they would drive by throughout the night and to call them if anything else happened again. They left, and everyone started laughing at me for running outside naked. I didn't care and laughed with them. I grabbed yet another beer, and Heather was doing the girlfriend thing of, "Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" and so on, and I'm not lying, I ate up all the fawning. We all fell asleep, but around 3 in the morning, I got up to get a drink of water. When I was going through the living room, I heard something from below me. Something in the basement. I could hear someone moving around. I quietly tiptoed over to my buddy John's room and woke him up. "Hey, there's someone or something in the basement, man." We sat quietly, and we could hear movement and people whispering to each other. I tiptoed back out and quietly went up the stairs and woke up Jimmy and Steve and told them what was going on. Our only phone was down in the living room, so as we went back down there to call the cops, suddenly the basement door started opening. In the dark, I could see one face and then another one right behind it. Jimmy flipped on the light and looky there, it was the same assholes from earlier. Jimmy and Steve jumped on one guy and started wailing on him, and then 2 more guys came bursting into the room. It was crazy. Everyone was just swinging and yelling, and one guy pulled a knife, and everyone kind of backed off as he pointed at Jimmy and said, "You're the fag we're looking for." I told him to fuck off and went to the phone, and Steve grabbed some darts from our dartboard and chucked them at the guy with the knife. The darts stuck into his jacket, but it gave us enough of a chance to get the drop on them again, and pretty soon it was another battle royale. We were so loud, our buddies from next door came over, and then it was literally 8 on 4. We kicked the shit out of them, and then I called the cops who came out right away. They tried to run back into the basement, so we slammed the door, and Steve and a guy from next door, Jason, ran outside and found the window that they had broken into and gotten in. They stood there kicking at every pair of hands that hit the window frame, keeping them stuck in the basement until the cops pulled up. They all got arrested for breaking and entering, assault, and a whole bunch of other things. We all had to go to the town court to file and verify charges. 2 of them had prior charges and got sent to jail, but 2 were given probation, which we thought was bullshit. Townies win again, I guess. We never did figure out why they had a problem with Jimmy. My mom was so freaked out about the whole thing when I told her that she wanted me to come home, but I told her it was cool. We never saw those guys again for the remainder of the time we were at school, but holy shit, that night was crazy. Why they went to such lengths to mess with us is still beyond me. I'm a female, and I was 21 at the time of this occurrence. Back in 2010, I was living at home with my mom, and I used to stay up until around 4 a.m. The only show that was ever on that was any good at that time was Law & Order SVU. So one night it came on, and I was about to turn my light off, when I heard a small noise from the front of my apartment. I shrugged it off and continued to get ready for bed. At this point, I've got no clothes on whatsoever because that's just how I sleep. The next thing I remember, I was hearing footsteps through the hallway, and my doorknob was jiggling. I thought, I'm just hearing things. But then I heard my mom's door, that was right next to mine, close. I thought maybe she had gotten up to walk our dog because sometimes he would wake her up at any time throughout the night. But then it hit me. The footsteps were slow, and there were no lights on in my house. Had my mother gotten up, she would have switched on a lamp or something. I slowly peeked my head out of my door and took a step towards hers. Then I opened her door to complete darkness. She was in bed, and it was obvious she hadn't moved. I called her name, and all she said back was, "Go to your room." I'm a very curious person, so I told her to turn the light on. And I knew someone was in my house, and I wanted to know who. But again, she told me to go back to my room. I never felt so frozen with fear. But I went back to my room, put some clothes on, and began looking for something to defend us with. I have a girl's room, so I didn't really have shit in there to work with. The next thing I hear is the bathroom door shutting. It was across from both our bedroom doors, and my mom yelled for me to get into her room. So I slam the door and lock it shut, and she tells me to grab the phone and dial 911. Meanwhile, we can hear this person going back and forth from my room to the bathroom, and we can hear him opening drawers and going through my things. The police showed up about 45 seconds later, and they came to the door, and the dispatcher that I was talking to said that our door was locked, and they were going to have to break it down unless we can come and unlock it. It dawns on me that this guy came through our front door because I never think to lock the front door every time I come home. My mom ran to the front door while the guy had locked himself in the bathroom, so the cops came in and go back there and break down that door with their guns drawn. I was freaking out at that point because it finally hit me that I was in danger. The police cuffed the guy and dragged him outside, and then they asked me if I wanted to try and identify him. I had no idea who he was. They retrieved many of things that he was trying to steal from me. Cameras, old phones, you name it. The police took a report and it was all over with. Come to find out, he was my neighbor's cousin. He had just been cheated on by his soon-to-be baby mama, so he went out and got high and decided to break into our place for some reason. Not sure what he was thinking. So, dude who broke into my house, let's not ever meet again, asshole. The sliding glass door. One of my childhood homes had a balcony that was attached to both my mother's bedroom and mine via big glass doors in each of our rooms. Next to the balcony were 2 trees, one I often used to climb up and down from the balcony. One night, when my brother and mother weren't home and I was about 13, I was reading in bed with a very dim reading light. I heard what sounded like something moving in one of the trees outside. But this didn't worry me, as possums and bats are common in our area. I had thin curtains on the glass doors that separated my room and the balcony, and the doors faced out towards the street where there was a streetlight lamp, and that was always visible through my curtains. Shortly after hearing the tree rustling noises, I saw a shadow slowly moving past the doors, at which point I immediately turned off my reading light and froze like a deer in headlights. The shadow was tall, so it wasn't a neighbor kid, and it wasn't my all of 5-foot mother. The person moved slowly, creeping as though they were trying not to be noticed. They wouldn't likely be able to see into my room, but I could see them thanks to the streetlight behind them. They moved past my doors out of sight, and I sat there, still unable to move or even think about what to do other than be absolutely still. That is, until I heard another sound. The sound of someone trying to open a glass door, my mom's door, from the balcony. I didn't know if she had locked him or not, but I wasn't taking any chances. I moved as quickly and as silently as I could to my bedroom door and locked it. I listened for what the person was doing now, and they were still jiggling with the glass door handle, but it sounded like the doors weren't opening. I felt relief. This person couldn't get in, and all I had to do was wait for them to realize that, and then they would leave. Right? Well, I heard the light footsteps move back along the balcony to my set of glass doors, and I saw a shadow stop directly in front of them. Again, I froze. He couldn't see me. He couldn't know that I could see him. I saw a shadow of his hand reach up to my door handle, and my heart stopped. Had I actually locked those doors myself? I was out there earlier. What if I forgot? I knew I just did that, but I'm starting to second-guess myself. The seconds leading up to him grabbing the handle felt like an eternity. But thankfully, when this person tried to open the door, it did not open. It was locked. I sighed such a sigh of relief, I was worried that he even heard it. After this, he began pacing the length of the balcony. I didn't have a mobile phone, and the landline was at the other end of the house, and I was too scared to take my eyes off of him. I was silently crying and praying that he would just leave. Then I heard him stop moving, and he said, "I could just break the glass, you know." Before I could even process this, I saw car headlights turn around the corner of my street and then stop at our property gate. My mom was home. The person on the balcony moved out of sight, and I heard a loud thump as he jumped off of it. When my mom came inside, I was hysterical and was barely coherent in telling her what had happened. Eventually, I got the message across and she called the police. They never found or caught anyone, but a neighbor reported a truck in the street had matched the description of a truck that had been reported recently for attempted child abductions, near my school, just a block away. Home Invasion. Would You Be Ready? By Susan G. My husband occasionally hunted and had guns in our home. I was scared of guns because I never knew much about them. Through the years, any time that my husband was going to be gone overnight, he would pull out a handgun and show me what to do in case I needed it for protection. I hoped that he would just hurry up and put it away. I was never going to need that. As our children became teenagers, I asked my husband to place gun locks on all of his guns, with all the horror stories you hear about kids and guns. We had several arguments about the gun locks, but I finally won. The only time the gun locks would be off was if he was going to be gone overnight, and I agreed to that. On August 2nd, 1997, my son Justin was supposed to be home around midnight. At around 11:30, I called his phone to make sure he would be home on time because I was ready to go to bed. He was at a friend's home playing video games and asked to stay out until 1. I agreed, but told him he must be home by 1, no later. At 12:40, I heard the doorknob jiggle. I got up and started towards the door, thinking it was Justin. And I had looked at the clock because I thought, wow, he's home early. I stopped before I got to the door because I didn't hear him set his alarm on his car, and then I heard a loud noise. My door was kicked in, and I heard someone scream, "Get down, ma'am," or "Lay down, ma'am." I was so scared that all I could think was to go to the bedroom where my husband Mike was sleeping, and I ran, screaming for my husband. I made it to the bedroom and tried to close and hold the door shut to keep the intruders out. It never closed all the way, but enough so that they could not come through. I was screaming as my husband ran over, and the door broke in half over my body. I don't remember if they shot through the door before it broke or if they shot after it broke, but I know that I took a 9mm bullet to the chest. We still don't know if Mike was shot once at this time because he does not remember either, but Mike began pushing them out of the bedroom, and I guess he was trying to push them out of our house. They were hitting him and fighting him because he was fighting for his life. I called 911 and told them our address and that we were being shot. I hung up the phone, and I could still hear the guys fighting in the living room. I thought about the gun that was within my reach, and thankfully, the gun lock was not on the gun since Mike had been gone overnight the night before. I grabbed the gun and did what Mike had always showed me. I cocked it and took the safety off. I thought, if I run out and shoot, I might shoot Mike. But then I thought, if I run out and shoot over their heads, they'll run and everything will be okay. I ran out and shot 2 bullets. They didn't run away. One of the intruders ran after me as I ran to the bedroom for cover. I turned to fire at him, but he didn't follow me into the room. I waited a few seconds to see what he was going to do, and I peeked out of the bedroom door and I could see his arm and the gun, but he could not see me. He was waiting to shoot me again when I ran out. What he didn't know was that I could slide against the wall, run through the dining room, and back into the living room. This put his back to me. I opened fire with the gun that I did not think I would ever need. I turned to look at the intruder who was still fighting with my husband, and to my horror, he placed the gun against the side of my husband and fired. I tried to fire my gun, but I was out of bullets. As I turned to run, he started firing at me, and one of the many shots he fired hit me in the chest again, but I made it safely back to the bedroom. I didn't hear anything for a moment, and thought that maybe they finally left. All of a sudden, I heard one of them scream at my husband, "Where are the fucking keys to the truck?" Mike answered, "In the bedroom, on the gun cabinet, in my hat." At least Mike was alive, but now the intruder was heading back to the room that I was in. He paused at the door of the dark room and screamed, "Where are you?" I was about 6 feet in front of him, but he couldn't see me. I didn't say anything, hoping he would leave. He put the light on and struck a shotgun to my temple, and he screamed, "Where are the fucking keys to the truck?" As I was trying to get the keys, he screamed, "Have you called 911? I lied and said no, hoping he would leave and the police would catch him outside. Where were the police? It took 14 minutes for the police to arrive. And I'm not holding this against the police, just pointing out that it only takes seconds to be shot, and it takes minutes for the police to arrive. Situations like this are over before they can help you. The intruders were already gone, and the one that I shot made it to my yard and died from the 2 gunshot wounds I inflicted from the gun that I did not like, but had used to save my life and the life of my husband. His friend actually ran over him with our truck when he was trying to leave. We're not sure if this was an accident or if he ran over him to make sure he couldn't talk to the police. I won't go into the horror after the shooting of a month in the hospital, lung surgery, scars that will never go away, the death threats, the trial, the nightmares, and the fact that I had to take a human life. But I will tell you that if you read this story and still choose not to take action to protect your own life, then you should not expect anyone else to take action to protect your life either. Since this home invasion, I have received my concealed carry permit and carry at all times. I practice with my weapon to make sure I hit my mark in case I have to protect myself or someone else. I hope that after hearing my story, you will also be ready if anything happens to you. And remember, I was never going to need it. I would rather not need it than need it and not have it. We Came Home to a Robbery, submitted by Tangier's Summer. When I was a kid, my parents and brother lived at my dad's parents' house. It's a long story about why that was, but basically my dad got caught up in some shady business and was sent to jail for 2 years. Don't get me wrong, he made a bad decision at his job when a coworker convinced him to get in on a scheme, but he really was a great father and husband, still is. He just made a bad mistake. He was the only one who pled guilty out of the entire crew that got arrested, and we're all convinced that this is what caused us problems down the road. So, because Dad was in jail, my grandparents told us to come live with them at their house. It was a giant place that had more than enough room for all of us, and they were snowbirds who went to Savannah in the winter, so we basically had the place to ourselves for half the year. When Dad came home from jail, he got a new job right away. Even with his conviction, almost everyone knew he was just a pawn in that scheme, so he had no trouble getting another job. Within a year, he was back at management level, and things were looking great for us. I was 8 at the time. My brother was 11. After my dad got a big promotion, my grandparents asked us to come down to Savannah for Easter, and then we could all come home together. My mom wasn't sure about it, as we were squirreling away every dime to build our own house, but my grandparents convinced her that we should do it. We deserved a break. Sometimes, I wish they hadn't convinced us of that. We went and hung out for a week in the spring, and it was nice to be in the warm weather and away from the cold and snow of Michigan. We were going to caravan it back home in time for me and my brother to go back to school, and off we went. But about halfway home, our car had some troubles, so my grandparents went on without us as we got some repair work done. It was much later in the evening at this point, and we finally got home around 10:30 after a long day of driving. We pulled up to our house and noticed that there were no lights on whatsoever, and that was odd for two reasons. One, my grandparents' truck and trailer were in the driveway, and two, they knew we were coming home because Dad had phoned them from a gas station. I know it's crazy to think, but we didn't have cell phones in the 80s. His spidey sense kicking in, my dad told us to stay in the car. Yeah, we had a family truckster like in the Vacation movie. And then he headed into the back door. But he came back a few minutes later and started talking to my mom. My grandparents weren't in the house, and they figured maybe they were just visiting neighbors or something. So he snapped on some lights, and we began dragging all of our stuff into the house. Mom went into my parents' bedroom, and then the bathroom, and screamed. There, tied to the pedestal sink, were my grandparents. They were tied up with duct tape all over and lying on the floor. My grandfather had a big wound on his head and was bleeding, and my grandma was out cold. Dad got to work on untying them as we stood there, and me crying at this point because I didn't know what else to do. And that's when we heard the voice behind us. "Don't you fucking move." We all froze, I kid you not. It was like those silly statue videos they make today. None of us moved a muscle. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see 3 men in black clothes wearing ski masks standing in my parents' room, and they all had guns. My dad turned around, and one of the guys began pistol whipping him and did that for a few minutes, and finally he fell down completely unconscious. My mom screamed again, and another guy grabbed her and threw her down on the bed and started fighting with her. The 2 other guys shoved me and my brother back into the bathroom and slammed the door, and this is very hard for me to talk about what happened next. We were both crying and trying to untie my grandparents while listening to these 3 men rape my mother, who was just crying to not hurt us and take what they wanted. After what seemed like forever, the door opened, and a guy pointed a gun at us and told us if we called the police, they'd come back and kill us. Then they left. Just like that. Wow, it's hard to tell the story. We did call the police, and they came out. Dad was hurt pretty bad and still has scars from what they did to him. My mom went away for a little while for treatment. My grandmother was never the same again after this. Every little noise or sound made her jump for the rest of her life. Grandpa took it a lot differently. He'd been in World War II, and I think he just filed it away as another terrible thing he had lived through. But he never talked about either of them. Me and my brother had to go to counseling, and honestly, I was still old enough to know that something was wrong, but I didn't know the whole gist of what had happened. At the end of the day, we were all okay, but super vigilant about locking doors and such. The police did their investigation but came up with nothing. The only thing we can think of for why this happened was that someone in my dad's past knew that he was saving a bunch of money for a house, and that he didn't trust banks. My parents kept a ton of cash hidden in a trick floorboard in a closet that my dad had made. We were convinced that that's what the guys were after, and had been casing our house, and saw that we weren't home. Even the police said that they thought the same thing, and they thought these guys broke in when they didn't see my dad's car. My grandparents getting home must have surprised them. They only stole some cheap jewelry and stuff like that. Doing what they did to my mother was reprehensible and sick. To this day, I can't forget my mother screaming to leave us alone just on the other side of a door, and we couldn't do a thing to help her. Like I said, we all came out okay, and after a while, lots of therapy, and I know there was a lot of strain between my mom and dad, but they loved each other enough to work things through, and everything was all right. So to the petty thugs who broke into our house and got away with it, I hope you're happy knowing you tore up a family for nothing other than some cheap shit. To anyone hearing this that might be a person who does stuff like this, and odds are, Uncle Josh, you have them listening to you, stop what you're doing and really think about the harm and hurt you're causing. There's better ways to make a buck than by destroying a family. Hey gang, thanks for listening to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and there's much more to come. We've got 2 for Tuesdays ready, working on volume 42, and I'd like to let everybody know ahead of time, as I've been told I don't do this enough, that there will be a live virtual campfire next Thursday, which is the third week in August at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. So hopefully you guys can all join me on the 23rd. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And when you subscribe, make sure you hit that little bell, which is the notification button. That tells you when anything that I do is now live. Also, if you care to, join me on Patreon. You can become a patron for just as little as $1 a month, and higher amounts will get you other perks, but all of it helps keep this channel going. Follow me on social media. All of the links to that are in the description below, and of course so is my Patreon page. Send any scary stories of any kind to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. And also, send me what you would like to hear as well, whether it's via that email or social media, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. I'd like to know what you guys want to hear. Everybody, be excellent to each other. And remember, until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.